Hey guys, Matt here, and I just watched The Wild Geese for the first time. This movie is directed by Andrew McLaughlin, who previously directed Chisholm, McClintock, and The Seawolves. This movie stars Richard Burton, Richard Harris, and Roger Moore. Now, The Seawolves is a film from 1978, and the movie is about a man named Colonel Alan Faulkner, who's approached by the British government, and he asks this retired mercenary to rescue this African leader who's been imprisoned. In order to do so, Faulkner requests that he uses his own men and his own team to do the job. Now, the three leads are very famous actors. Richard Burton, for most of you, might be most notably from Where Eagles Dare with Clint Eastwood and Exorcist II, The Heretic. But that latter film is not his best work. Richard Burton was also in films such as The Longest Day, Cleopatra, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and The Spy Who Came in from the Cold. He's a really good actor. He doesn't have a whole lot of range because he sounds the same no matter what he's saying, but he's a very good actor. Richard Harris, on the other hand, for me is known for three movies. He is Marcus Aurelius from Gladiator. He's from Unforgiven, and a lot of you know him as the first Dumbledore from the first two Harry Potter films. Now, Roger Moore, he is, of course, James Bond. He's the third man to play James Bond. He was also in a TV show called The Saint. He might be the more recognizable face. Now, something that movies did that I really liked is this was, you could say, the precursor to The Expendables, where Richard Burton and company, they're all older men. They're all retired. So everyone they use for this mission, aside from the fodder soldiers, if you will, like no one is expendable, but most of the main guys they recruit for this mission are older, retired soldiers. And I liked how they did that, because if this movie had just been the three of them as the main leads with a bunch of just younger soldiers, there would have been a whole lot of casualties and bodies with these three older guys, slowly running around and being a little out of place. Now, once all the soldiers agreed to this mission, they did something where Richard Burton would go around recruiting these men, and he would pretty much ask them, why are you doing this? Almost like an interview. And they would all say, since I've retired, since I left the military, soldiering and the life in wars, all I know, which was nice, because a lot of films, they just cut to, the recruits, the people they bring on for the job, and that's it. You don't really get to know any of the soldiers, except for like a couple scenes. Here, that's different. And just like in the movie Space Cowboys, all these older men, if they're going on a very dangerous mission, even though they once were soldiers, guess what? They have to train again. And they do that here. Richard Burton recruits a man who was his drill sergeant. And so he has him instruct the younger soldiers as well as the older guys too, to run laps, to climb things, to jump, to fall, to do all the things to prepare them for their mission, which is something I didn't expect, but I liked it. Now, Richard Burton also recruits a medic, the drill sergeant, like I said. He also recruits an explosives guy, and each of these actors have their own unique personalities. So when you see them periodically, you're like, oh, okay, that's that guy, or it's not just the guy with the mustache, or the guy with the accent. You get to know who these actors are, and I like that, because in a lot of films, when you have a group of individuals, they only spotlight or highlight a couple of them, where the rest of them are just nobodies. But here, you get to know this group, and you get to know their connections to one another, their history, and I like that. Just like the movie Gettysburg. It had so many different characters in that film, yet they all had their story, and they all had their connections to kind of get the audience on board and to feel and to, connect to who they are. I also liked how these soldiers were like, okay, we're going to go on this mission, and we're going to break this guy out of prison, so we'll do it. But we're going to need this many men. I liked how this didn't do the typical movie trope where it's like, okay, you want the best of the best? Okay, so we're going to send in 5 guys to do it. No. I like how these men are like, hey, we're older soldiers. We can't do everything, so we're going to need so many people. We're going to have this many people do this many people do that, and we're going to make a battle plan, and we're all going to be in charge of a different section, different sector with X amount of people. And I like that because it made the warfare and the battle scenes more interesting and exciting because you had more lives, more bodies, and more people engage in this thing, and not just 5 people that don't get any scratches on them type of thing. Now, I will say my biggest gripe with the film is that the antagonist, the bad guy, is a surprise, but they're in the film very little. And so once the antagonist shows up, you're like, oh, okay, that's who the bad guy is? All right, let's see where this goes. And then they don't show them again until the end of the movie, and then even that resolution is very quick, and I felt it was unearned. I felt that there should have been more resolution, because most of this movie is set during this mission, during the battlefield, during all this carnage and chaos, and it's real exciting to watch, and yet the end of the movie comes, and it just doesn't feel as earned as it should have been. It's like as if they were to end Saving Private Ryan like that. You just be like, oh, wait, that's it? I wanted more. But the action and the violence in this movie, pretty darn good. For practical effects, which I can't believe I'm saying that with, movies today being so much CGI and special effects, but the practical effects were really good. And this movie was a lot more violent and a lot more coarse language than I thought there would be. You have a lot of British people and Scottish people using their terminology and their slang, and some characters, with their innuendos, which I was surprised by. I thought this was going to be... I don't know why I was surprised by it, getting all the, the veteran actors in this film, but I was surprised by some of the language that was used, especially considering some of the movie takes place in Africa. I was surprised that certain terminologies were used freely. One thing I did like about this film is there's a relationship, albeit a short one, with a white character and a black character, and how they have differences, and yet they're able to resolve them. I thought it was a little too quick of a resolution, but there's a moment where they form a bond, after having their differences. So I did like that because I didn't expect it to be in a movie like this. Also, there's a scene where they're undergoing their mission, and when they start it, it's supposed to be either at nighttime or right before sunset, and the way it's filmed is during the day, but with a lens and a filter over the screen, so it's supposed to look like it's at nighttime, but you can clearly tell it's broad daylight with some tint over the film. And with a movie like this, you do have its share of predictability, especially when the government approaches a specialist and says, this mission's just right for you, it's a piece of cake, it's a walk in the park. It usually doesn't turn out that way, but you need that intrigue, that adventure, and that element to make it exciting and dangerous. Now, as far as the 3 leads go, Richard Burton is fine as the commanding officer. He's the leader in charge, albeit he does say everything the same way, with the same inflection, so he doesn't really emote happiness or sadness a whole lot, but when he does crack a smile, it's nice to see. Roger Moore as Sean Flynn, he's the pilot, and he's fine. I'm so used to seeing him as James Bond, and so it was kind of hard for me to take those, James Bond lenses off. He's fine. He's the charismatic yet serious when he needs to be character in the film. His introduction is pretty incredible. Just what his character does and how they bring him into the film. I'm like, whoa, I have not seen anything like that before, but that's pretty cool. He likes to smoke a cigar in the movie. That's the one thing that put him aside from James Bond for me from the others, is he was the only one that smoked cigars. And so when he smokes a cigar in this movie, you're either going to think he looks silly or really cool. I think he looks silly, personally. And then Richard Harris as, I forget the character's name. It's a unique name. But he plays the reluctant one to go on the mission. But he has a son to think about, and he's the character that plans all the missions, and he's the bright one, the smart one. He's the character that I think most audience members will connect to and relate to the most. This movie is an example of why I like westerns and war movies from back in the day, and it still holds true today in some cases, where if you're making a western or a war movie and you need a good guy, bad guy, female lead, and a partner, then usually the casts are made up of legends or all-stars. So if you like The Expendables, if you like The Seawolves, if you like The Dirty Dozen, or any, ensemble cast type movies, then I would recommend this film. So because of that, I'm going to give The Wild Geese a B. Until next time, guys.